Hello, welcome everybody. We are back at the Kidmin Podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Conley. And you know what? I've missed Nick. It's been a while since he's been on here. And so we decided, let's have a conversation again. Actually, it's more intentional than that. It's not that Nick missed me or that I missed Nick, but we actually want to talk about something that is a really great resource and great information that if you are a kids ministry leader, this is something that we oftentimes don't pay very much attention to, but we think it is something that you should pay a lot of attention to. And so we're going to talk
Yeah.
about new family retention. So Nick, how you been doing? It's been like a month and a half since you've been on the podcast. What you been up to?
It feels like 2 days. Like, it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but I have enjoyed you having better guests on, and it's been great. And the topics about VBS and some other things, which have been awesome. But I'm back just to talk about this, and then I'll go away again, and you won't see me in a little bit. That'll be better for everybody.
It actually worked out really well because I didn't have my host lined up for this week anyway. And you said, hey, we should talk about this retention thing. And I was like,
Yeah.
perfect. You're my guest for this episode.
Deal. Well, it's
Deal.
classic podcast too, because you actually do have some conversations already recorded for the future, but just slotting this one in. And
I
this
do.
is one of the things with Kidmin.com, Kenny, we're trying to do a good job. It's early, so it's new, right? Of like coordinating the content. So some of what we're highlighting on the website and articles is similar to what we're talking about on the podcast. But most importantly, and it's applying to like us as leaders in the Kidmin world in our churches. What are we doing? Like, what are we working
That's
on?
right.
What should we be working on? Stuff like that. So
And
yeah, I'm
that's a
excited to
very
talk
good
about this today.
reminder. That's a very good reminder too for this podcast, because although this is the Kidmin Podcast hosted by Kenny Conley, there's a large, like the iceberg underneath it is Nick Blevins. Nick Blevins is very much a part of this because this podcast is very much tied to kidmin.com and our weekly email, which Nick does probably 90% of all of that. So it's not.
But I would also say that iceberg isn't just me, because this is what I love about Kidmin.com, and hopefully it'll grow, is it's all these other writers that are great leaders and voices in Kidmin that, if anybody has read any of the articles over the last number of weeks, Allegra, who you had on, wrote some of those articles, and our friend Andre wrote some articles that we talked about some weeks back, Brittany Nelson. So that's what I love about it. We want to have more of that. So certainly if you have ideas of something you'd like to write for, you can email us at hello@kidmin.com or something like that. So yeah, I do send the weekly email. That is me pulling the levers on that one for sure. But hopefully it's just to highlight other voices and other apps and tools. Oh, that's another thing. If you have a great tool app resource that you use in your children's ministry, in the email in Kidmin Weekly last week, we asked you to hit reply and tell us what it is. So go ahead and do that. We'd love to feature
yeah.
something that's helping you, so to help all the rest of us.
Oh yeah, I've got some ideas. I should probably submit those too. I'll just
You
call
should.
you later though, Nick, and I'll tell you what tools I'm
Sounds good.
using.
Or put them in the spreadsheet that we both are shared to on the Google Sheet. There you go. Do that.
Well, let's tell a little story. It was many years ago when COVID, this little thing called COVID happened, that we decided to write and release a product about retention when suddenly every church in America stopped meeting. The timing of that was absolutely perfect. And I think it worked out well because we say, hey, while you're not meeting, let's work on our retention strategy, which a lot of churches did. We welcomed a lot of people into that resource. And it's also tied to a resource that you actually created maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer
Close
around that.
to.
That is actually the most downloaded resource in the history of Ministry Boost. And actually, it was before Ministry Boost existed. This was a resource that you, what is it? It's like something like around like 2.3 million. No, it wasn't that big, was it?
Downloads. Yeah, it's like a popular podcast. No, some probably 10 to 15,000 times this resource has been downloaded. It's the 16 gift ideas for first-time families PDF.
Oh, that's great.
Where it wasn't 10 years ago, but it's probably 8 years ago or so. We went and just asked churches, hey, what are you giving to first-time families, if you're giving them anything, as a way to say thanks for showing up. We're glad you're here. And, I feel like the craze of that was even higher back then. Like churches were doing T-shirts or tumblers or whatever. But we were specifically focused on the families too. Like especially if you give something to new kids as their first visit or whatever. And so we just asked a bunch of people, put that resource together, and man, it's been downloaded so many times, and used in churches, which is fun.
And what's funny is I remember in some of those examples, and again, this was 9 years ago, you had some churches gave out like CDs of music to listen
Oh
to,
yeah, yeah.
right?
That's what was hilarious. Is like this is on Facebook. We promote this on Facebook too, so people comment on it, which you get all the comments in the world. It's great. It's like you get the hardcore fundamentalists like we just need to give them Jesus. It's like okay, calm down. Um, but then you get a lot of people that love it. But lately, or especially over the last 2-3 years, people are like, this feels kind of dated. There's a DVD recommended in there by one church. There's a CD recommended. So it was dated. Like people were giving that stuff out back 8 years ago when it was probably already too dated.
Right.
And now
Right.
it's really dated.
It's like is there a church that gave out? I remember I worked at a church where we developed a CD-ROM. So it was like,
yeah, they did. That was one of them. Yep.
That was one of
them. It was music.
CD-ROM.
Yeah, both of them. I don't know. The one might have been some kind of music video, but I think they were both related to music, worship music or whatever. So it was kind of funny.
No, this was back in, this was 20 years ago. We created a CD-ROM. You put it in your computer, and it was like almost like a website. Like you click on the item.
Yeah.
Played videos, stuff like that. Back before.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the internet was around 20 years ago, but I don't know why we were developing a CD-ROM.
They've been around for a while, but yeah, some people are listening to this like, how old are these guys? But many of our listeners, they know these days. But yeah, it looked really dated. It needed a refresh for years. I mean, it was long overdue, but it's got a great refresh. Thanks to everybody who submitted and helped us by sharing what your church does. Took a little bit of a different spin this time on it than last time, but it looks great. And we're going to, share that obviously with everybody. And I'm excited to see.
Can I ask for like a spoiler? Like, is there any one item on there that was like, you thought was like really cool, like something that wasn't on the original from 8 years ago that's on one of the churches doing now that's really cool?
Yeah, no, I probably can't give you that. You're going to have to download it to check it out.
Okay.
No spoilers. I do like though, unlike last time too. Okay, I'll give you one spoiler. One church has a stuffed animal with like it's wearing a shirt of the ministry. I think that's
awesome.
Cool.
So that's actually very cool.
It is very cool, but it is more expensive. It's probably $10 to $15. So are they doing that per family? Like I don't know.
What is the cost
full details
of a life given to Jesus? Can you put a dollar sign on that?
Way to go, Kenny. Although to be honest, though, these tumblers are not cheap either. Like when churches were doing that, or even now a T-shirt. Like I mean, one T-shirt costs $12 if you get it printed yourself, and it's you know what I mean. So
usually,
if you could outsource, they find a way to get your teddy bear mascot with a shirt on, the ministry shirt on him. That'd be pretty cool. But so you have to check out the guide to see all the other ones. Some of the ideas will be the same ones from the old version, but definitely lots of new stuff. And we took a little bit of a different spin on how we put the PDF together. So
and this
I'm
is
excited
all free
for people to see it.
It's a free download. So you can just click on the link, download the, is it still 16 gift ideas?
Yep, 16 gift ideas for first-time families. And if you're listening to this podcast, you'll get it hopefully by email if you're a subscriber at kidmin.com. If not, make sure you go subscribe there and you'll get it. So
you should definitely subscribe because we send out the Kidmin Weekly that goes out every Wednesday, and it's usually it's links to some relevant articles. We usually try to tie it together, so whatever conversation we're having here on the podcast, we have conversations or articles that are written about that. But then we also like to share really cool ideas like tech and apps and resources that people are using. So it's definitely a great weekly email to get just to keep you up to date on this stuff. But so that's free. That's a 16 gift ideas for first time families. But the conversation today, we want to kind of lean into retention, family ministry. We actually for Ministry Boost, we created a resource called the New Family Retention Guide. That was what it's called, right?
Plan other than guide, but same thing. Right. Same thing.
And actually, it was such a fun resource to create, and we did create it with COVID, knowing that there is an opportunity to help churches reimagine how they retain. We found that most churches' retention plan, if they have one, it's not family centric. It's somebody in the church who doesn't usually have touch points with kids. It's trying to develop a plan for how you retain people. But we found that if you can really capture the imagination of a kid, that's one of the stickiest things that you can do to bring families back. And so we thought, like, how important would it be to create a guide that's not, and we're not, this isn't a separate retention plan. like this could be your church's retention plan. So it's kind of
Yeah.
imagined from the perspective of the children's ministry, right?
Yeah, and we say in the new family retention plan, we say early on, you kind of have to choose your fighter, choose your journey. You have to decide, am I going to make this plan and implement this just for family ministry because that's what I have control over and I can do that, but that's all I have control over. So I'm just going to do that, and it's kind of separate from whatever the rest of your church is doing. I don't love that. That is certainly not my preferred method. Or am I going to talk with whoever I need to talk with on the team about, hey, can this be our church-wide plan? No matter what, I do, we do encourage you to make them work together. So even if you make your own, like, for example, in my church, Kenny, kind of our church-wide retention plan, what we're doing with adults when they come for the first time, there's the first 2 weeks after they come, we're following up with them in a very specific way with very specific, contacts. So we don't heavily do a lot with parents in that window because we don't want to overwhelm them with, hey, they're getting 2 emails a day from different people, 2 texts. Like that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is coordinated. And so even if they are separate, our plan kind of is all tied together. But even if it was separate, figure out how to make it work together so it feels like it's one plan to the family.
Yeah.
I think would be
Yeah,
important.
100%. And so we think this is a really great resource. We partnered with some really great friends that were doing ministry in really unique environments, and we got to build this thing together. And it's one of my favorite resources we ever created with Ministry Boost. And
Oh, me
and
too.
it's full of so much. But I think what I like about it so much, not only does it have so many practical resources in there, it provides a framework to think about retention. Because a lot of times people are like,
Yeah.
oh, let's give away some gifts. And
Yeah.
well, what do we do the second time they come? And what do you do the third time? What happens if they come like a couple, 3 or 4 times, but they still haven't plugged in? Like, is there something we should do differently than what we've been doing? And so it kind of gives you a framework and a plan of action for really from when they first come to visit, or even we're actually thinking about the pre-visit, like before they even
Yeah.
show up, because new people are showing up at your church before they even physically show up. So you got to
Oh,
have a
yeah.
mindset. But that's what I thought was so powerful was this framework that we created. So what do we want to do? We want to kind of take people through this framework and how we
Yeah, but
reimagined retention.
I, let's talk some of the reasons why it's important, right? Like we all want to retain new families, but I think you did this. You've said this story before years ago, so I'm going to tee you up and hopefully you remember it. But do you remember the story of when you went to your pastor and one of the other churches you worked at with the new here registration cards, the new family
Oh
cards?
yeah.
And stacked them up. Tell that story because I think and we could talk about some of the numbers, the math of retention. I know some people don't want to, you don't care about the math, but the point is retention is hard. Good retention is actually probably lower than you think, like the percent of families that actually come back and stick.
Hmm.
But it doesn't have to be that low. And there's so much opportunity there. It's so hard to reach new people, to invite them to church, to get people in the community to show up. But once they're there, we have a little bit, still don't control everything, but they've
Right.
come one time. Now we have a lot more, opportunity because they're there. So tell that story and then we could kind of talk about the why
Okay,
that
yeah.
is
At first, I was like, "Okay, what story is it that I told you?" But I remember it clearly
the
because
stack, the
I
stack.
was
Yeah.
this was when I was in Austin, Texas, at Gateway Church, and I was the next gen pastor there. And this was in the season when our first time families would fill out a physical card to when you signed up. So they filled out that information first, and then somebody at a computer would put all that information in. And I saved the cards. Like I didn't get rid of them. I saved them. I don't know why exactly, but I'd only been there for like maybe a year, and we had it was a stack this tall. Like it was ginormous because we would have a lot of times we'd have 20 anywhere from 10 to 20 families visit a weekend, and
Hmm.
over the course of 50 weekends, that's I can't do math, but that's a lot of
Yeah.
people.
700
Um,
1,000 families,
yeah,
right? Like each car represents a family. So you're talking about 2 to 3,000 plus people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and came in there, and I remember walking up, and now they're all going into our database and all those things. But had an opportunity to speak to the staff. We were talking about like a casting vision for next gen, and I had a lot of things to say that I wanted to cast vision around. But I brought in that stack and put it on the table, and I know my lead pastor, like, he lost his mind over just like because I held that up and I said, I don't have a plan for any of these people. Like, I've not emailed them. I've not followed up with them. Because at the end of the day is like, at a large church, multi-site church or whatever, like, there wasn't my responsibility. We had a communications team where we had but I
Yeah,
know this is what I
assimilation
know.
or
They didn't
next
have a
steps or
plan for
something.
that either. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it just was one of those things of like, any lead pastor would be like, wait, we didn't steward those first time guests. And, my questions, and I think today with the databases that we have now, that more than likely most of our churches have some automated emails that go out to first time visitors, but it wouldn't surprise me if most still don't. And,
yeah.
or might just be an email, but it's not a strategy or whatever. So I think whatever I was trying to communicate that day around vision around the next gen, I think it got lost behind there's a really powerful opportunity here that we were missing, and I think many other churches miss as well, and that's kinda what this is all about.
Yeah, and I give it, for me, it goes back a little bit. I do think churches are doing a lot better job with this now. A lot more churches have an assimilation person, and next steps, whatever you want to call that. They have a new here area in the lobby. They're doing something for first, like a new here class or growth track or something like that to
Yeah.
help people take steps. But I remember years ago, I really wish I could remember his name. The guy that popularized this phrase, he worked at might still work at Lifeway, and he would talk about like we need to give people maps, not menus. Like a lot of
Mhm.
churches, it's the Cheesecake Factory, menu where it's like, hey, come in, we've got lots of options for you. But what people really need is a map with clear steps. And so when we put together the new family retention plan, it was like, hey, we can't tell you your specific step. Oh, you need to do growth track, or you need to do starting point, or you need to do, but make, let's come up with some general steps that every person takes naturally in their journey connecting with the church and make them small enough that they're easy enough for people to take and clear enough that they see that it's the step they should take. And so the guide helps you think through how do we help somebody before they even come feel like they were expected, like we've planned for them, right? That's step one. Or step two, how do we help that first time guest feel seen? But
Yeah.
just enough seen, not so much seen that if they're an introvert, they're like, this is weird, but just enough seen that they feel like, oh, they felt welcomed.
Yeah.
Right. And so that kind of thing is we put it in steps. Kenny, we're big on frameworks and steps, but I just think it's because it's really helpful for new people to attend. And the guide was all about, hey, helping you implement this in your church. I think a lot of churches have programs and ideas and some plans, but sometimes the steps aren't clear. There's too many options. They're
Right.
not connected. And then probably the biggest gap, which you've always been great at, not just with this, but even in volunteer recruiting or anything, is the follow up. How
Right.
good is the follow-up? Like, do you just send an email and a text and that's it? What if they don't come back? What if they do? Like it branches into all these things. And I know in the guide, we kind of created a plan for all that. Like, here's how to keep following up with people. And eventually, obviously, you're not going to keep contacting them. But I feel like in churches, we usually stop contacting too soon,
Right.
as opposed to contact too much. Although you can be a stalker. Don't do that.
Well, here's one of I think the coolest understandings that I think that as we dove into building this resource, something that kind of rose to the top for me at least, that I think that most churches do a pretty good job of helping first time guests feel welcome. And in some ways, you kind of have to because you can't check in without like filling out the card
Yeah.
or filling out the form. So at most churches, every first time guest, if you have kids, every first time guest feels seen and feels like welcomed. But what really matters, and I think is what's really telling, is when they come back for the second time. And we like to we use a term is like we want to help guests feel remembered, because if you're a
Hmm.
big church, and you may not be a big church, but if you're a big church, they're already in their head thinking of like this church is too big. We're just going to be a number here. Like nobody's going to really know us. And for most people who come for the second time and they show up, nobody's gonna remember them. Or what happens if they come, like, 2 months later? Like, nobody's remembering their visit, but you can create a
Yeah.
system, and we talk about it in this. You can create a system so that way when they do check in, it rings all kinds of bells. It's like, "Hey, this is their second time visit," and that's kinda what we emphasize in this of, like, do everything that you can to make like, even if, like, you may not recognize them when they walk through the door because it was 6 months ago that they came, but by the time those parents come back to pick up their kids, it's enough time for the bells to be rung, for you to put together the little second time gift bag or something you want to give the child or give the parent, or when the parents kind of pick up their kids, you're going to say, "Hey, it's so great having you back with us again." That's
Mhm.
powerful. That's people are like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, you remembered me? Of course I remember you." Now again,
Like,
normally we wouldn't, but this is
maybe.
why, and Jim Weidman always talked about this. He was my mentor in kids ministry, and he's been such a good friend to both Nick and I. But he'd always talk about, there's a biblical mandate around caring and shepherding people. And we hear the story about the shepherd who counted his sheep and he went after the lost one. And we use like that shepherd, he just counted 1, 2, 3, 4. We have church databases that count for us. But a lot of times we just use the database just to check people in, but we don't use it to
Mhm.
count like, oh, here's a new sheep that showed up one time and they're back again. Are you letting the technology help you be a better shepherd? And these people need a home. They need a flock to be a part of. And so we just haven't set it up that way. No one has. Like when we presented this idea, we were all scratching our head like, hey, how can we make CCB do this to where when somebody checked in for the second time, it alerted us, like it let us know. And it wasn't just a
Yeah.
report that I'd run. So
Yeah.
we think that if we can figure out how to make that second time visit more memorable, you're going to get
Yeah.
a third time visit and a fourth time visit. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think to go back to the math a little bit, just because this is one of those areas, unlike a lot of other areas in church, where churches don't know what is good. You know what I mean? Like when attendance growth, a lot of churches know what is good. And a lot of times are you growing? That's good. 3% every year is actually pretty great for a church. Now, when churches grow 10, 20%, like that's awesome, but it's obviously quite rare. Giving per capita, percentage of volunteers serving. Not every church knows what's healthy in these areas, but I feel like retention is one of the ones we know the least because most churches don't measure it. There's
Right.
nowhere you're not keeping this data anywhere. But the great news is in family ministry we check in, so you could know. And what I would say is this is our experience. There are some sources on this. We've got other friends in ministry. Rich Birch does a great job. If you listen to his Unseminary podcast and you search on his site for retention, he has some great articles on it. But in my opinion, if you did a search for for example, right now, here we are in 2026 and kind of like the middle, second half of the school year, go back and look for who was created new in the system, what kids were created new in the system last school year. And of them, how many of them have attended this school year? That's one
Right.
example of retention. You're going to figure, like, imagine 100 kids were created last school year. And of that group, now search how many of them have checked in this school year. Of the 100 kids, if you had less than 20%, I would say that's probably to sound the alarm. Like, that's not great. Now 18's not terrible. Single digits, that's pretty rough. And some people are probably thinking, man, that sounds terrible. Like, 20% even doesn't sound great at all. But 20 to 30 is probably like 25% is probably pretty good, is a good average, I would say.
Yeah.
Like I think Rich Birch recommends 26%. It's a interesting, goofy number. And then if you're 30% plus, 30, even 40% plus, you're doing great. You're doing great. Doesn't mean you can't do better. Doesn't mean you shouldn't work on some of this stuff and make sure it's all dialed in really good. But certainly if you're below 30%, it's something that you don't want to work on. If it's below 20%, you really want to work on it. And I know sometimes when you hear that number, you think that's crazy. We're only getting, like, if we're doing well, we're only getting 30 of 100 new families back, like not even a third. But it does change. The larger church, it's usually harder. The smaller church, it's usually a little bit better than that. But I think those numbers are helpful to share so people who are listening can go figure out, okay, how are we doing? Let me
Okay, so
benchmark
that's
this.
a really great metric, and anybody probably with any database that you're using could run those numbers this afternoon, and you'd have a pretty good idea. But it also is looking at a broader, like last year and this year. So,
Yeah.
so my question for you, Nick, because you're really great with the numbers, what's another metric you could run to let you know of like, because when you look at that, it's almost too late to go back and contact all the people that started last year. Like
Yeah.
you missed
Oh,
your
yeah,
shot.
for
That was
sure.
it. I think that what the metric you just
This,
gave is a good
yeah,
pulse. It gives you a
it
pulse
is.
of
Yeah.
how you're doing. But what's a metric or a number you can run that where it's not too late, like where you see like somebody who came in the last 2 months, and what would be a good metric to know more of like how are things happening right now? Like how am I measuring what's happening right now to show that retention is working?
Yeah. Well, the good thing, I mean, part of it is that number, it is a good check. It's like your blood panels or something like that. You can go in and just see how the numbers are in the past. But it is also good currently, too, because if you have, so again, let's say you had 100 families last school year, that's,
Hmm.
not even a full school year is not even a full year, but that's 2 families a week. If you are tracking it regularly ongoing, and 2 new families are showing up every week, it's never that consistent, but keep with me for a minute. If you're keeping 2 new families a week, you know that you have to, over a month, that's 8 or whatever, you have to be above that same percentage. You know what I mean? If you had, I don't know, 10 families visit over the last 5 weeks and only one of them's come back, you're at 10%, you already know still not great. Like, so that same
Yeah.
percentage helps you here. But I know the Unstuck group for years has shared the number. I'm probably going to get this a little bit off, but the idea, of course, is you should keep more of your guests that keep coming back. So what they would say is, like, your second time guest, you should keep 40% of those, and your third time guest, you should keep 60% of those. Which makes sense, right? Because the more they keep coming back, the higher your percent chance should be that they stick.
Yeah.
Because they're already making return visits. So, but I think, so you could use both of those numbers. For me, though, I probably would stick with the, um, that original number, and just, I would shoot for, can I get 40% of these, 40 to 50 of these first time guests back for second time? But
Hmm.
the thing you have to think about, though, is give them 2 months at least. Like,
Yeah.
that's not how we think. Like, if you've been a part of a church or you've grown up in church, like, you don't think that coming back means coming back 7 weeks later. You know what I mean? But that's people's journey. They take it at
Yeah.
different speeds. So I don't know what window I'd put on it. I'd give it at least 2 months, but
Yeah.
maybe it's even within 5 or 6 months. That's a metric you're watching, is what percent of our first time guests are becoming second time guests.
Hmm.
And is it 40 to 50? That would be great. And then second to third, should be higher, 60+% or whatever. And if you do that, you'll end up in that number. We've run it for us. Our friend, Hilke in Florida, he and I were talking about these numbers, Kenny, and he's at a church looking at that. And their numbers and our numbers are similar. We'll have, when I'm looking at kids using the definition I just shared with you, like first time attended last year, came this year as well. We're not talking about how often they've come, right? Just that you came then and you're back again now. We're both 30 some percent in the kids, and even 40% with teens and students.
Yeah.
That is going to look better than it is if you do your whole church, because adults don't have to check in and it's harder to
Right.
tell and all those kinds of things. But so there is the bar can be even higher than you think. But I think for some people, they probably think, man, we should be keeping 2/3 or 3/4. And if
Right.
you are, that's great. It's just, it's rare. I don't see
Yeah.
that a lot.
That's great. That gives people, I think, a lot of uh some handlebars to, like, okay, we could actually start measuring this and paying attention to this and give ourselves a grade of, like, okay, whatever we're doing is working. And here would be the funny thing. Like, if you're hitting, like, 20 or 30% and you're not really doing anything, just imagine,
Yeah.
what could happen if all of a sudden you get more intentional about your follow-up emails, a follow-up text or phone call, or, a gift, a first-time gift, second-time gift. I mean, you could maybe double what you're doing, but just because you're being intentional
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, I mean, we've done, I mean, Rich Birch, if you go to his website, unseminary.com, and search for the retention and stuff like that, he talks about some of the math, and it's in the Unstuck group, for example, when they talk about guests through the front door, the Unstuck group will say it'd be great if you could have as many guests in a year, counting all of the new attenders, as you have an average attendance in a week. So a church
Okay.
of 500, average attendance has 500 guests in a year.
And
10 a
you
year.
talk about, like, kids and teenagers and everything, right?
Yeah, everybody included. Yeah.
Okay.
If you could be above that, you're doing really well. Like, if you can be around that, you're doing great. That's good. If it's less, it's harder. And again, that's a number we don't control as much. How many people come for the first time. But you think of, like, the church, a larger church that is averaging 1,000, they should see 1,000 guests in a year. Well, just think about the difference between if that church is keeping 18%, 180, versus 30%, 300. That's
Mhm.
120 more people. You know what I mean? That church that may have barely been keeping up with the number of people leaving, because people leave every year too. Like, what if 150 leave? And that
Right.
church added 180 but lost 150, so they're up 30. That'd be actually a
Mhm.
very normal church, actually, to
Yeah.
use those numbers. But imagine that church all of a sudden increases to 30%. and I know there's a lot of math and people are like, but just trust me on the numbers. Instead of adding 30, they just added 150. So that church of 1,000 went from 1,000 to 1,150. And that's the kind of growth that a lot of churches don't see, but some of it comes down to this right here, and we don't, at the end of the day, it's church. We only control so much things. That God's in control. He's always at work, and we can only do what we can do. But we also don't want to wash our hands of it. Like these are the kind of things that we can do to give people a great first impression as they're making their way back to God.
Yeah, and we think, again, it's one of those things like a lot of families, they don't come to your church because of the legendary children's ministry you lead, but it is maybe one of the strongest reasons why people come back again. And
Yeah.
so, like, they came to hear the message, a friend invited them, and so that's why
Yeah.
they're there. But then when their kid lost their mind because of the fun game that you did and how friendly somebody was, or the balloon they got when they left, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
and then now they want to come back because their kid won't stop talking about it. This is where the retention strategy really does fall in our court, in so many ways. And even though may not be in charge of the retention strategy, the assimilation strategy, you you actually have a lot of influence in it. And so it's an opportunity for you to
Yeah.
speak up and to say like, hey, here's some things that we could maybe do. And then are we measuring? Is there something that we can do to really be more intentional about that? This is like I would say this is like 301 kids ministry. I mean, this goes
Yeah.
beyond scheduling volunteers and picking curriculum. But this is when we put on our all church hat. Like we're not just the kids pastor anymore. We're thinking about the full health of our church and how we care for people well.
Yeah.
This is you leveraging your influence to impact the whole church, with with the things that you do have control of, and I think that's pretty powerful, and I think it's really important.
Absolutely. And a lot of times the church, if you get like earlier, we said you got to pick your journey, right? Are you doing this church wide? Are you doing it separately on your own? And if you do it separately, make sure it works with the church wide. But this is the kind of thing, like if you do it, you do it well, your church is going to adopt its church wide, because they're
Right.
going to look at that and say, hey, that's working really well. That's great. You've increased retention. We're definitely seeing the fruit of that. We should be doing this everywhere. And you're going to say, yeah, I know. I told you that, 6 months ago or whatever,
Y
whatever. This is a good opportunity to take what's happening in family ministry and help it benefit the whole church. And in most churches, again, this, if your church is largely made up of these families. The average
Mhm.
church, 40, 50, 60% of it is parents with kids. And so if you can win here, you're winning with the whole church, which is huge.
I always like to tell the story anytime we talk about retention because it was something somebody I knew told me about how they stuck with a church, and it's bizarre. Like I don't know a single church that has ever done this or would ever do this, and it's not even really financially feasible. But is a church ministry leader that I've known for years. He and his family were visiting a church and they showed up and they had all their kids with them or whatever. And then that Sunday night, I don't even think they were warned, which that one's a little bit weird. But then like at 5 o'clock that Sunday night, the pizza delivery person showed up at their front door, knocked on the door and delivered like three pizzas, and said, welcome to our church or something like that. And they were like floored. Like this church bought us dinner. Like
Three
how
pizzas. That's a big family.
I know, that's crazy, and so again, it's one of those things of like, okay, that's not really practical, and that's probably not sustainable, whatever like that, but it's always resonated for me of like, they showed up in a really big way, and you know what? They came back the next week, and they came back the week after, and a few months or years later, he came on staff of the church. You're like, it was like, that was a risk worth taking for him, and again, you'd never know, and, that the person visiting would be a future staff person, whatever. But it just made me think of like maybe we should think more intentionally about, you don't do what you don't do. There's opportunities. What's that saying that they say in North Point all the time? Do for some that you can't do for everyone, or whatever
Do
it
for
is.
one what you wish you could do for everyone. Do
Yeah,
for
there.
one what you wish you could do for everyone. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
being bold sometimes and like really going above and beyond because the Holy Spirit prompts you, like, hey, feel like we need to show up in a big way for this family. But
Yeah.
does it
Here,
does it fit into your strategy?
Yes, and here's what I would say too is I have so many stories that are funny. Like I don't personally, because I've only been in two churches my whole life. The one I grew up in, and this one we helped start. So I've actually never been new to a church. But visiting churches, I get to experience it all the time, like a guest. And our elementary director, Lisa Malidi, who used to attend North Point and was very used to what that was like, and they do a great job. When she came back here to Maryland and they moved back here and she visited a bunch of churches, she has the best stories. It's because there is a version of like that you're doing too much. Like the pizzas
Yeah.
at the house, probably too weird now.
Yeah.
She had one where they gave her, this is the worst story. Don't do this. A new guest got a loaf of bread because Jesus is the bread of life, and you carried it
We did
around
that. I
on
went to the
Sunday
church where
morning.
we did that. We delivered warm
Oh,
bread, fresh
or at
bread.
least you delivered it, but she had to carry it around in the church like that morning.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. And and then everybody knows you're new. Now I know some
Because you're
churches they
wearing,
have
because you got croissants in your purse.
yeah, because you carry like a whole loaf of bread. Some churches there's a balance here too, but I know of churches that would give new people this folder that was intentionally so big they couldn't hide it in a purse.
Yes, I've heard that too.
I do like the idea that other people couldn't see that you're new, but not in a way that everybody can tell that you're carrying like a massive banner or something like that. So if there's some version, like kids check-in tags that have a little thing on them, it's not obvious to everybody, but the people that know this kid's new. I love that. I don't like people getting serially called out. I know of churches that had fresh baked cookies delivered to people's houses. I think if you're showing up to their house in any way, that's a little bit weird now. It's more than a little bit weird. So you have to find the balance of that. But there is something like, for example, and we talked about a couple ideas there that cost money. A card handwritten from the small group leader that led that kid that morning, and they say something positive about that kid. That is so powerful and costs like $1.20, if that, you know what I mean? So per kid. And so there's options that are almost free. There's options. And then the guide, you'll see both. If you get the 16 gift ideas PDF, there's options that do cost more, like that teddy bear. But the point is you can do something no matter what it is. And all of it, to me, it's like, again, I almost hesitate to say this because people might hear it wrong, but when you do spend money here, it is more than worth it because, like, again, if you are doing this for 1,000 new people and 300 of them keep attending as opposed to 200 and 100 more are coming, how awesome is that for the church? And financially, we would not look back 5 years from then and say, man, I wish we hadn't spent that, whatever it is, $10 a family, to retain those 100 more families.
Right.
What is that, $1,000? Oh my gosh, you would totally spend that $1,000 if you could. And in the church, sometimes you don't have it, so you do the free options. That's great. But when you're looking at everything else that we're spending money on in the church, that's one of the things where you can look and say, yeah, that's money well spent.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, let's wrap this up. We've got a couple things to point you to. One of them is this new 16 ideas for new families, gift ideas for new families. So definitely click on that, download that. You'll get this in your email if you subscribe to this podcast, if you subscribe to kidmin.com. You can go over to kidmin.com, click on resources, and it's going to be there. You can grab that. And that's free. That's 100% free. Let that inspire you and all those things. If you're interested in this bundle, and we don't normally on this podcast, and we're not going to normally on this podcast be trying to sell you stuff, but this we've had this bundle now, this resource for over 5 years. It came out during COVID.
Since the pandemic. So 6 years.
And we've, maybe 700 or 800 people have bought this thing over the course of all these years. It normally sells for $100. We're doing a special with this launch of this, just $25 for when you get this. You can tell more about it, Nick, but man, it's of all the things that we sell or products we have people invest in, this is maybe one of the best. Like, this could pay dividends in your ministry and your church more than anything else we do.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Cause again, if you reach more new, $25, I'd pay that to reach one more new person, to help me develop a plan that's going to help me retain new families. We love it because we're big fans. I think this is all of kids ministry, right? I think this is all Kidmin leaders. We love good systems, good documents, good, processes to get from other people and then implement. That way it's like we're taking something that's 70% ready and we just or 80% ready and we just have to put our final 10, 20% on it and to implement it. So that's, what this plan is. And that's why I know a lot of people love it because I don't have to start from scratch. Do you remember when we first unveiled it, we did a webinar and we showed the plan itself, the PDF of like the framework and the steps. And then we also showed the framework of the follow-up and we asked people, how many of you were like overwhelmed or excited? Because we knew there was a personality that, like, if you're like a systems process checklist person, you're just going to love it. And if you're like not that person, maybe you're more relational or whatever, you're like, this is overwhelming. And it was great because people were like, I'm overwhelmed and excited. Like, you know what I mean? I'm both
Yes.
at the same time. Because it is, that's what we love about it. It is a process. People take steps in many different ways. We have to be ready for all the variations of their journey and be able to maximize it and help them take their next steps. And the new family retention plan helps get you there without starting from scratch.
Yeah, that's right. No, it is. We have this really beautiful framework, this document that shows the 5 stages, but then we have a secondary one that's all communication. And it's awesome because it says these are the emails and texts you need to send at this stage. These are the emails and texts. And it's when you look at them together, you're like, oh, mama, that's a lot. There's a lot of things happening there. But if you're a
Yeah.
systems person, you're like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And we give you all those texts. We give you the emails. So it's
Yeah.
just up to you to change those. So if you feel like that would help your ministry, definitely invest in that. So what a great conversation, Nick. Thanks for being back on here again. A lot of great actionable items. I hope it helps you. I hope it helps you to maybe run some reports in your database to find out, take that pulse of where things are. You could probably do this on your own or ask the smart person in the office who knows how to run reports. You probably have that information in a couple of minutes and you can get a good measure. So thanks for being here with us again. We love having these conversations with you about how we can implement great ideas and strategies into ministry so we can take our ministry to the next level. We'll see you in the next episode of the Kidmin Podcast. We'll see you next time.